Right. So welcome back to the Fit Commit podcast. I'm Marcus. This is Andrew. Quick question to kick us off. Have you ever been told by a trainer or a fitness app to eat 1,200 calories? You stick to it, you drop some weight, and it all comes to a halt. Your energy tanks, your motivation crashes, you stall out, and you think you failed. Well, actually, what's happening is that you were given the wrong number. So today we're going to break down the difference between BMR and TDEE, and we'll spell out what those acronyms mean in a moment. But that's basically your survival burn rate versus your actual real life day-to-day burn rate, depending on your activity levels. And unfortunately, many fitness apps, gyms, trainers use BMR as a benchmark for how many calories you should eat, which is not ideal. What you really want to do is look at TDEE, and we're gonna go into that. And to dive right in, Andrew, let's start simple. What do these acronyms mean?
So for BMR, it's basal metabolic rate. And essentially what they're saying with BMR is how many calories does your body need to survive, not including any movement or digestion or anything else. So if you were in a coma or if you're just sleeping on the floor all day and you didn't move, that's how many calories you would be burning. Whereas with TDEE, it's taking into account those calories from your BMR, but then all other activities that burn energy as well. So for example, if you're walking down the street, moving my hand like I'm doing right now, like that burns energy as well. If you're training in the gym, even digesting food, that also burns energy as well. So TDEE is taking into account all of the actual energy that you're actually burning, not just your basal metabolic rate, which is just the energy that you need to survive. So they're two separate things.
Interesting. And so the consequences of using the wrong number, what are some of the consequences? Did I get it right that one of the consequences is that metabolic adaptation problem? And what are some other consequences of using the wrong number?
So depending on which way you're going, if you're trying to bulk or cut. So for example, if you're basing your bulk on your BMR, so let's just say your BMR is 2,000 calories, but you're actually burning 3,500 calories every day, and you're doing a small surplus based on your BMR. So for example, let's say you got into 2,300 calories. Well, the consequence of that in that situation is you're not actually gaining any weight because you don't have sufficient calories to gain that weight. You're actually way under just even your maintenance calories. And then similar sort of thing, if you're trying to do fat loss, you've probably got too much of a deficit and you're more than likely going to put yourself into the metabolic adaptation. And when you're in metabolic adaptation, there's a bunch of different side effects that you can get. So you can lose more weight than what you might need to, or you might lose muscle mass in addition to all the fat mass that you're trying to lose. You can lose all your energy levels. Everything could probably stall, and you just might not be feeling good all round.
All right. So it sounds like TDEE is something you could modify based on your activity levels and other factors. Can you modify your BMR?
You can. It's just, it largely depends on how much muscle mass you have. Like that's the biggest thing. Like your muscle tissue is much more metabolically active than fat tissue. So, for example, if you have someone with 80 kilos of lean muscle mass and let's say they have 10 kilos of body fat, and then you have another person with 80 kilos of lean muscle mass, but they have, let's say 50 kilos of body fat, the person with 50 kilos body fat extra will have a higher BMR. But if you took someone with noticeably higher muscle mass, they're going to have like noticeably higher BMR as well. So it's not to say that the fat tissue isn't metabolically active. It's just nowhere near as metabolically active as muscle mass is. So yeah, in general, to modify your BMR, the biggest influence out of all of it is going to be your muscle tissue.
Okay, interesting. And what things so ideally you want to increase your BMR so you're burning more. What things could reduce your BMR so you're burning less?
Again, main influence would be your muscle mass, but I would argue metabolic adaptation could definitely be negatively affecting that as well. So yeah, like if you're crash dieting or you were dieting too low for too long, I know some people in this industry don't like to use the term survival mode, which essentially what they're trying to say is it's metabolic adaptation. It's the same thing really. But what people need to understand is if you're eating too low for too long, let's say you're in 1,000 calorie deficit, like you should be losing about 1 kilo per week. Well, your body's not just going to keep doing that. You're not just going to keep burning 1 kilo per week because eventually you'd be 0 kilos. Like obviously it doesn't work like that. So what your body basically does is it tries to block out all non-essential processes that your body doesn't need to survive. So for example, if you look at some bodybuilding competitors or fitness competitors, it's pretty common with bikini competitors. Like a lot of people notice it's like a phenomenon, so to speak, where they lose their period. Like they no longer get their period. And the reason for that is, well, it's not essential to survival. Your hormones aren't essential to survival. Like you live with crashed hormones, not optimally, but you will survive. And it's the same thing. I can speak from personal experience. Was like 16 years ago or whatever it was when I did my first competition. I got in shape. I didn't do it the best way. I didn't really know at the time. I sort of crash dieted to a degree. My calories just went lower and lower and lower. There was no break. I just went low. I think I got to like 1,500 calories at some point. And I can speak from firsthand experience. Your metabolism crashes and your hormones crash. Like the only thing I was thinking about 24/7, this stand just ran out of battery.
No worries.
I'm going to have to fix this up.
All
Shit.
good.
All right, let me just plug this in and it should work.
No worries.
We're having all kinds of technical issues today.
Yeah.
I got that. It's like, those stabilizer holder things. One of them. I just fucking ran out of battery. Me, bro.
And what happens? It just fell? It just
Yeah,
collapsed?
it's because the battery holds it there in
Okay.
place.
Okay.
Hang on a second. No, come on. Stay there. Shut itself.
Are you using your phone as your camera?
Yeah. So let me try. Might have to get another stand. I don't know why this isn't. Yeah, I think it's just out of battery. All right. Just give me a sec. I'll try one more thing. If that doesn't work, I'll get another stand.
Okay. No worries.
Because I got it plugged into the laptop's USB. Maybe I need to plug it into a power source USB. That makes it different. Go. There we go. Okay. Let me just fucking rotate it. Am I a bit out of focus?
Yeah, a bit out of focus.
Might have fucking smudged the camera while I was grabbing it.
Okay. But I think that's fine now.
Oh, come on. Serious? There we go. Okay. Oh, sorry about that.
No worries.
Fucking where were we?
We're gonna have to do a lot of editing on this on this recording to fix it up, stitch it together. But all good. Yeah, so I think we were talking about BMR adjusting. You mentioned that in your experience, eating too low caused metabolic adaptation, and then you were moving on to your next point.
Well, yeah, so we're saying BMI, if you're eating too low, can lead to metabolic adaptation. Yeah, and I was talking about all the hormones and everything. Pretty sure I was almost done. I'm trying to remember where I was up to. So your hormones crash, all you can think about was food. I'll sort of go from there. Is that all right? I'll sort of start towards the end of where I was finishing off.
Yeah, that's fine. And then we can just stitch the two together. We can overlap them.
Sweet. Easy. So yeah, when you're in metabolic adaptation, your hormones pretty much adapt to the calories that you have available. So because your hormones aren't really necessary for survival. So for example, with myself, when I was doing the bodybuilding competition back in the day, and my calories were just going lower and lower and lower, my body was only really concerned about, you're in this massive deficit. How are you going to survive long term? So it's like, we sort of think about it as, yeah, it's only, 2-3 weeks left out of a 14-week cut or whatever it may be, but your body doesn't know that, right? So we think, oh, it's a 14-week cut. Your body doesn't care. All your body knows is, if I keep this up ongoing, well, eventually I'm not going to have enough to survive off. So I'm going to start suppressing all the non-essential functions for now so that I can live longer. So that's how people need to be thinking about it. So yeah, if you're getting to metabolic adaptation because of the wrong calculations with your BMR, well, obviously that's of the calories you should be having and you're basing it off BMR, obviously that's a massive problem. And yeah, it's not going to be very enjoyable when your hormones start crashing and you're just out of energy, you've got no motivation, all you can think about is food. It just makes the whole process very, very difficult. So yeah, ideally we should all be basing everything off TDEE and not the BMR.
Interesting. Have you heard or seen of any real life examples where a client, let's say a fitness training client, went off BMR and then they messed up their metabolism?
I'm trying to remember. It's been a while. I can't remember if I might have, because look, it is pretty common. I know when a lot of people look at, like, for example, BMI. So if people use BMI as a metric for, what their weight should be, in general, they're probably also using BMR. So those two kind of go hand in hand. Because, if you're trying to do it the right way, you should be basing it off your muscle mass and your body fat and your TDEE. Whereas, if you don't really know the right way, like the real old school way, it's like BMI and BMR. So yeah, I can't remember a specific example, but I do remember it was very, very common where a lot of people were just way off base, like where they should be eating and what they're actually eating.
Interesting. And then that probably causes confusion on the trainer side as well, because it's like, wait a sec, this client seemed to be losing weight and now they're actually gaining weight doing the same thing, doing the same workouts.
Yeah. It throws things off massively. Like that example I was giving you before with the office worker and the laborer. Like the laborer's TDEE is like almost probably, if could even be more depending on how much he's working. It's more than double your BMR. So if you're basing things off your BMR, you're massively, massively off. Again, it depends on what you're actually doing with your daily activities though.
Interesting. And with BMR, there's a related term that I've heard, RMR, resting metabolic rate. It sounds the same, but what's the difference between that and BMR?
I'm actually not sure, but what I think is the difference, as far as I know, because I'm pretty sure I remember trying some calculators for that back in the day. I'm pretty sure they gave me the exact same reading. So as far as I can remember, I could be wrong on this. Don't quote me on this. I think it's just another way to word it, but I could be wrong on that. If there is a difference, what I would make an assumption on it would BMR is exactly what we've been talking about. Resting RMR might just mean if you're very, very inactive, like you're just, lying in bed all day or something like that. Again, I can't see what the difference would be. Maybe they're taking into account you're twisting and, turning around in bed, maybe, but don't quote me on that. I'm just speculating at this point.
Gotcha. And maybe it also includes things like passive things like digestion,
Yeah.
the calories it takes to
Potentially,
burn
yeah.
your food, like you mentioned earlier, because that's part of the TDEE equation.
Yeah. Could be.
Speaking of the TDEE equation, let's break it down a little bit more. So the first part of it is NEAT, non-exercise activity. So these are things like walking, fidgeting, basically non-gym things or all your activity except things that would be considered exercise. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, all the things, so, fidgeting, walking, like even this conversation that we're having right now, talking, that burns energy, although it might be a little bit, a lot lower than exercise, it's still burning energy, and it adds up. And, when you talk, you don't just stand there and look directly straight and only move your mouth. Like you move your eyes, you move your head, you move your hands, you're moving your arms, depending on how, how active your body language is. But yeah, there's so many different aspects to non-exercise activity thermogenesis. A lot of people don't understand. Like it could even just be walking out of your house, going to collect the mail, well, that's some NEAT levels. Going to the shopping center, that's some NEAT levels there. Going for a walk, driving your car, you're still using energy. So like every single piece of movement that you can think of is sort of lumped into the NEAT levels. The only thing that you don't count towards that is your exercise activity thermogenesis. And yet this is why it can massively throw off your results, because a lot of people think, oh, I just need to look at my exercise levels. That's the only thing that's important. Well, it depends. Like if you're Michael Phelps and you're swimming 8 hours a day, then yeah, look at your programmed exercise. That's a very important piece of the puzzle. But if you're only training an hour of the day, well, you've got to be looking at, well, what are you doing for the rest of the day? The other, 15, 16 hours or whatever it is. What are you actually doing? If you're not very active, well, then yeah, exercise makes up the majority of your burned calories. If you are very active, like a mailman or a laborer or something like that, then yeah, you're probably going to be burning a lot more in your NEAT levels as well. So yeah, NEAT is very important in terms of figuring out your TDEE to figure out what do I need to be eating to get the results that I want.
For someone who works from the office, what would be some ways for them to increase their NEAT, their non-exercise activity? Maybe take their dog for a walk every morning and every evening. But what else can the city people who work in those downtown offices, what can they do besides sitting at their desk?
So it's just little things, something as simple as take the stairs instead of taking the lift. Like that makes a difference if you have to, go for a lunch break or whatever it may be every now and then. Instead of just having your lunch in the office, like try to actually go downstairs. So like, take the stairs, get outside, get some sunlight, walk to the park or whatever it may be, have your lunch there. Same thing on the way back, take the stairs, go back up. And it's you just got to look at your day and your routine and just try and look for little things where you can make that improvement to burn those extra calories. One of the most common ones for most people in the city is take the stairs. That's one of the easiest ones. Depending on the person, some people might just like to eat at their desk. If you do have the time and you're able to, well, try take the stairs again, go outside, actually get some sunlight. If you got the time, walk to a nearby park if there is one. Just little things like that. Or it might be, instead of catching a train or taking the cab everywhere, if there's somewhere that's within walking distance that's reasonable, take that route instead. For example, with me, one of my previous jobs, I remember I would, instead of my biggest thing was just I went to the park to have something to eat. It was good, got some sunlight, went for a walk, have something to eat at the park, walk back, get some sunlight, get back to the office. So yeah, just little things like that. You just got to look for those little opportunities that you have. Or, it might even be if you're allowed to at your job, if you're allowed to have little breaks, go for a walk on that break, to wherever makes sense for whatever time period that you have allowed for the break. So yeah, you just want to find what you're able to do within your routine, all the little substitutes that you can.
So what are some average or optimal NEAT rates in terms of, and how do you measure that? Do you measure it with calories burned with non-exercise activity? And if so, what are some optimal ranges or optimal levels?
I think the easiest way for most people would just be to count their steps. That'd be the easiest way to do it. And the reason I say it's the easiest is because, look, even if you don't have a fitness watch, your phone can count your steps as well. It might not be as accurate as a fitness watch, but it's better than having no idea whatsoever. So I'd say that would be the easiest. If you do have a fitness watch, you don't want to take it for gospel, depending on what watch you have. Like if it's a standard, let's say a standard low tier fitness watch, it might not actually be giving you the most accurate reading. But then if you have a super advanced Garmin Phoenix 6 or whatever they have at this point, it might be a lot more accurate. So with NEAT levels, with a fitness watch like that, you might be able to more accurately predict, how many calories are you actually burning throughout the day. It might be able to give you a more accurate reading. Whereas for the average person, if they just want something easy, then, just measuring steps on the phone might be easier. But yeah, it depends. It depends on what you have available and what you're able to get to measure this progress. So yeah, either steps, or if you have like an advanced fitness watch, it can give you a more accurate reading with the calories being burnt throughout the day. Just something on that. I don't know how much this has changed. I do remember though, when I last heard about this, at least 5 years ago now, over 5 years ago, I remember that the accuracy of calories being burnt from a fitness watch, the accuracy of that started to get lower the higher intensity you were going. So for example, if you were tracking your calories from your heart rate, normal activities, working at the desk, going for a walk or whatever it may be, it was fairly accurate. Whereas if you try to do high intensity interval training with a fitness watch, it was a lot less accurate. And the way that you would want to make it more accurate is for your normal daily activity, you could use the fitness watch. But when you were going to actually start exercising, ideally, you would put on the heart rate monitor. So the heart rate monitor is able to be much more accurate with the higher intensity stuff, whereas the fitness watch can get away with all the lower intensity stuff. So just a little takeaway on that.
Okay, and you could probably layer on top of that. Lost my train of thought. What was I going to say? I lost my train of thought, but I'll just move on to my next point. Okay, so now, Andrew, you're starting to get into exercise activity, or EAT as the acronym. And this is where people sometimes overestimate or underestimate because it's hard to track. Like you said, for things like cardio, maybe it's accurate, but if you're doing weight training, might not be as accurate. Would one method to make that more accurate be like a fitness app that kind of calculates the amount of energy it takes to displace a certain amount of weight and then translate that into the amount of calories that you burn? Would that be a more accurate method?
Yeah, I'd say the easiest way to do it would be heart rate monitor is probably going to be the most accurate thing. So you could just use like a fitness app. Normally they ask, are you doing cardio? Are you doing like a hybrid session, or are you doing a strength session? And with the heart rate monitor, you're going to be as accurate as possible. But yeah, if you don't want to go that far, then the next sort of best thing to do is if you're accurately calculating your TDEE. So with a good calculator, so like your average calculator takes into account it normally does the activity multiplier. So like I was saying before, it'll give you the options of like office worker times 1.2, mailman times 1.4 or 1.5 or something like that. And then like elite athlete or whatever it may be at 1.8, 1.9, something like that. It is good. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just in my opinion, it's not as optimal as what it could be, because you're not differentiating between what's your NEAT levels and what's your exercise levels. It's just putting them all under one category. And like the example I gave you before with the office worker and the laborer, they could be two completely different things that just absolutely throw everything out completely. So with a really good calculator, you could be a lot more accurate, without even needing to have the heart rate monitor as well. So you would say, okay, how active is your, throughout the day, like your routine, your normal routine, and then you would also separately input your exercise levels. So yeah, I'd say that would obviously be easier if some people don't want to put in the extra effort and put like a heart rate monitor on, so they can still get fairly accurate with the calculator. And then if they want to go all out, then yeah, putting on like a heart rate monitor during the training would give them a much more accurate representation of what they're actually burning.
Interesting. And the last piece of the TDE equation, I believe it's TEF. the thermic effect of food, which you mentioned earlier, the calories you burn digesting your food. How much of a difference does that make into the equation?
So it's mainly protein. Protein is like the main one that burns a lot more energy when you're actually digesting it. So I don't remember the exact numbers for carbs and fats. I remember it was like 5 to 10%. It wasn't anywhere near as much as protein. Protein's about 20 to 30%. So this was one of the little tricks that I used to give my clients was if they were going to be eating something, so let's say it was like a cheat meal or a night out or, it's a party or whatever it may be, and they're still trying to lose weight. It's fine. You can go and enjoy that party, but if they wanted to enjoy the party while not negatively affecting their diet, then I would normally say, okay, well, max out on your protein and, minimize your carbs and fats whenever you're out, especially if they're drinking, just because if you're drinking, it's more likely that you're going to be, because, alcohol gets priority in terms of digestion. So it's more likely that you're going to be gaining body fat in that situation. So if you do have the option, ideally you're doing it with protein for two reasons. One reason being it takes a lot more calories to digest that protein. Two being it's harder to turn protein into fats compared to the other macronutrients. Like it's gluconeogenesis. So it's the process of turning protein into fat is harder because it's two phases. So as far as I remember, protein needs to be turned into carbs first, and then carbs need to be turned into fat. So it's a two-phase sort of conversion. So it's a lot more difficult to turn into fat. Whereas fats are obviously already in fat. Carbs only one process away to turn it into fat. Yeah, it does make a difference. It's not the biggest piece of the equation. So it doesn't mean because protein burns more calories that your diet should be 100% protein. It just means that, it's something that you want to take into account if you're trying to get every single part of the equation correct to optimize your results.
20 to 30% is a lot though. Call it average 25%. So a quarter of your caloric intake could basically um, cheat 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 on by eating protein instead of carbs and fats. A quarter of your caloric intake is a lot.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
then again, an all meat diet might not be for everybody, or might not work for everybody.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's like you do need the other stuff as well. Like to be fair, if you were going to have an all meat diet, depending on what meat you're actually having, there would be a lot of fats that come along with that as well. But yeah, like if you're going to be like fully keto, you might not have the best energy levels because you got no carbs as well. And you could argue that it could potentially mess up brain function as well if because we do need carbs. Like for optimal brain function, you do need some level of carbs. Nothing wrong with keto. I think it's good short term. And there's like the carnivore diet as well. Again, I think it's fine short term. I wouldn't really recommend it long term. Yeah, that's a topic for another day with all the gut health stuff. So yeah, it's not, you don't want to take the TEF stuff out of context and then just be like, oh yeah, 100% meat, all good. I hacked 25% of my calories. It's like kind of, yeah, but there's so many other factors that you need to take into account as well.
So any other components of that equation, or was TEF the last one?
Yeah, TEF's the last one.
Okay. So so your TDE is your NEAT, the amount of calories you're burning in non-exercise activities. Then you got your EAT, which is your exercise activity, a calorie burn. And then we have the TEF, the thermic effect of food. And of course, plus BMR, which is kind of the baseline of that equation.
Yeah, that's right.
So why do so many apps start with BMR? And a lot of trainers as well, they still go by BMR. And by the way, BMR sounds pretty scientific. You hear an acronym like that, BMR, BMI, sounds pretty scientific and sounds pretty legit. But like you explained earlier, it can really throw you off. It can throw off the client and the results they're getting. It can throw off the trainer. So where does the usage of BMR come from? Is it from trainer education? Is it from just the way gyms do things, or where do you think that mismatch between using the right metric and the wrong metric comes from?
I would say it's just a lack of education. And again, I can only go from my own experience. I just remember when I was education manager at an old gym that I was working at, nutrition was the least understood aspect of getting people results. Like most people just didn't understand how nutrition works. All they basically knew was just the basics. So, protein is to build muscle and carbs is for energy and fats. Like most people didn't even know that fats was to help with your hormones as well. They're just zero education on any of that. In general, what most trainers would do would just be to try and make the diet more healthy, which, obviously that's a good start. but it doesn't really give you the full picture of everything. So yeah, I think it's just the industry in general. I don't know how much it's changed recently, but yeah, I do remember that most people just didn't have the basic education on nutrition. So yeah, as far as I can tell from my personal experience, I would say it's mainly the lack of knowledge on the topic.
Interesting. But the better coaches, the better apps, including the Apple Watch, Apple does a lot of scientific rigor behind the way they measure things. I noticed Apple Watch does actually go by TDE, which is good to see.
Yeah, it's a big change since like back in the day when I started. Like there was no fitness watches, there was barely any apps for any of this stuff. So yeah, it's a big change from back then. So, but yeah, at least things are heading in the right direction.
Okay, so we discussed three components of that TDE equation and how you can adjust them. What about BMR? How can you adjust BMR? I think you touched on it earlier, but is there any way you can increase your BMR? I think you said by maintaining more muscle mass. Does it depend on age and gender as well? What other factors could you play with to get the BMR
So
in your favor?
so yeah, like other factors do play a part of it. I think the biggest factors out of all of them is more so going to be your muscle mass and your how healthy your metabolism is. I think they'd be the two biggest ones. I'd argue muscle mass is the bigger one. So, for example, if you have someone that's 100 kilos at 10% body fat, well, then they've got 90 kilos of lean mass, which is it's quite a lot. That's quite a big person. And their TDEE, sorry, their BMR at that weight would probably be around 2,200 calories from memory, which is quite a lot. But then if you look at, let's say, a 50-kilo female, there's not really that much that she can do. Like she can fix her metabolism, but at the end of the day, 50 kilos at, let's just say she's 20% body fat, there's only so many calories that you can burn with that at rest. Like it is what it is. It's mainly muscle mass dependent. So yeah, like mainly gaining or losing muscle mass is the biggest influence. And then if your metabolism is affected negatively, like metabolic adaptation, then fixing that metabolic adaptation would make some big improvements as well.
Speaking of that metabolic adaptation issue, I think you explained to me a method by which to fix it when you do have that metabolic adaptation, a calibration plan, if you will. So if someone feels that they already made this mistake of going by their BMR in terms of their caloric intake, and then their body adapted down to their BMR, how would you recommend that they fix it? What would be the plan?
So the popular term for it is reverse dieting. And essentially what you're doing is you're just slowly increasing your calories back up to your maintenance calories. Ideally, you should be weighing yourself to make sure that you're not putting on too much weight, which just essentially means that you've either gone up too much in calories or your body's just taking a bit extra time to handle that. Yeah, basically what you're doing is you're just going up in terms of your calories until you get back to your maintenance calories, sort of do like a reset, so to speak. And then from there, you can actually, start doing a diet again. Ideally do some diet breaks in between that so that your metabolism actually stays healthy long term. In terms of being sure about this, because a lot of people can just assume, it might be something else. Maybe your energy has been negatively affected from something else. Maybe you're taking some medication your doctor gave you, like, SSRIs or whatever. Maybe that's what's affecting your energy level. So assuming there's nothing like that there and you're 100% sure, no, it's my diet, there's something wrong with my diet. My recommendation first thing would be, okay, if you don't actually know your calories, we'll actually track your calories without changing anything first. Because if you're like, I'm going to eat more and then you track your calories, well, you don't know where you were. Like you got to know, okay, if I feel like shit, what am I actually eating right now? What level are my calories at right now? So my recommendation would be, okay, don't change anything. Actually figure out what you're eating, get that number, and then go and look at what your TDEE should be based on a calculator. So you can actually compare it. So example, if you're actually eating 1,500 calories, but your maintenance calories should be 3,000, well, then you're like, okay, well, there's obviously a disconnect here. That makes some sense as to why I'm not feeling so good. So yeah, find out where you are, find out where you should be, and then very slowly increase yourself to get back to where your maintenance levels should be.
Yeah. Okay, super. And once you have your TDEE, how would you use that metric? For example, if you're trying to lose weight, would you aim for a caloric deficit between the food you're taking in and your TDEE? And if you're looking to gain some weight, you would want to eat more than your TDEE. Any other interesting uses of that metric?
So yeah, you're bang on. So pretty much you base everything off your TDEE. So remember, TDEE is maintenance. And if you want to change from your maintenance, so If you're maintaining at 80 kilos, but you want to lose weight, well, then you need to eat less than that. You need to eat less than your TDEE. Or if you want to gain muscle, same thing on reverse, you need to eat more than that. Now, there's two ways that you can sort of do it. It's not necessarily, sorry, I shouldn't have said it that way. It's just sort of standard. So you sort of say eat less. It's not necessarily eat less. You just need to create a deficit. One of the ways that you create a deficit is by eating less. The other way that you create a deficit is by burning more. So you can create a deficit through two different ways. So for example, if you add in cardio, let's just say your maintenance is 3,000 calories. Let's say you add in cardio where you burn 500 calories a day. Well, you have created a deficit. You're in a 500 calorie deficit and you're going to lose weight. The other way is you could just eat 500 calories less food, or you could do a bit of both. It might be 250 calories worth of cardio, 250 calories worth of deficit. At the end of the day, you've made a 500 calorie deficit. So the results will be very, very similar in terms of fat loss. You could argue at a more advanced point, let's say you're doing like competitions and everything, you could argue when you do the cardio, you're allowing the fat to burn quicker, more efficiently, et cetera, et cetera. So, if you do high intensity, it sort of frees up your fat, blah, blah, blah. But for your average person, you just really need to create a deficit one way or another. It doesn't really matter now how you're getting it done. Again, you could argue the cardio benefits, like you're getting cardio benefits when you actually do cardio as well. But yeah, when trying to lose or gain, this is the way every single diet you've ever heard of works. So for example, it's like intermittent fasting. People because most people that do a diet or a fad diet and they swear by the fad diet, I would argue you're not actually looking at your calories, because that's how every single diet works. It works based on calories, not based on, oh, I ate at 4 p.m. and I ate at 12 p.m. I was like, who cares? At the end of the day, it was still 2,000 calories. It's like, does it make a difference? I'm not saying it doesn't make any difference, but I would argue the largest part of the difference that you're getting is from the calorie numbers. Second most important part is going to be the macro numbers. Essentially, where are your calories is going to determine, are you gaining weight, are you losing weight, or are you maintaining weight? And then what weight are you gaining and what weight are you losing? So are you gaining fat, or are you gaining muscle? Are you losing fat, are you losing muscle? That's normally determined by your macros and how you're training as well. But yeah, like for example, if you're following Weight Watchers, yeah, you lost weight because the Weight Watchers meals were in a calorie deficit from what you're normally eating. If you're doing, I don't know, keto, same thing applies. You have less carbs, which generally means you're going to have less calories, assuming you didn't go crazy on your fats and just increase them massively. So you have less calories, so that's why you're losing weight. Intermittent fasting, you're eating for a shorter period, that's why you lost weight. So yeah, pretty much every diet protocol that you can think of, the reason it works is because in one way or another, it made a deficit. So yeah, like a lot of people think it's the fat itself. It's like, no, it was just a different method to manipulate your calories.
Interesting. That's actually a very good point, because sometimes you think that that is this particular style of dieting, keto or carnivore or whatever, but ultimately it comes down to your calories. And that's why getting the maintenance calorie number is so important. You got to get that TDEE right, so you know what to aim for. Because if you're not, there's a saying in business, what gets measured gets managed. So if you're not measuring it correctly, you're not going to be able to manage it correctly. You're not going to be able to manage your physique, your body composition, etc., properly. And that goes for both trainers and their clients and clients themselves. So to wrap it up, gyms, would you say most or half, or what proportion would you say are still stuck on BMR?
I'd say like your general big brand gyms are more likely to be stuck on BMR. And then I'd say like your more boutique gyms that are, very high quality coaches, they're more likely to be with the TDE or like performance-based gyms. So for example, like a CrossFit performance gym where they actually have competitors, I would argue that they're more likely to be basing it on the real things because they need results. Like if they're a gym and you can't get me results and we're competing, well, then what's the point of training at this gym? I might as well go to another gym that can actually get results. So those type of gyms, if they don't do the right thing, they're going to lose clients because the clients are there to get the results. They're competing, blah, blah, blah. And the same sort of things with like boutique gyms for transformations or fat loss or whatever it may be. It just sort of makes sense. The logic sort of follows. If you're a fat loss gym and you're not doing it right and the people aren't losing fat, well, you're not probably going to get recurring customers because no one's getting results. Whereas like, let's say the bigger brand gyms, again, I can only speculate based on what I've seen in the past, but I would say there's less incentive for them to do things. It might be the trainers themselves that would do it. You might find a good trainer at the gym, you might find a bad trainer at the gym, but the actual gym itself, depending on what type of gym it is, I'd say they'd more than likely be basing it on BMR as opposed to TDEE. But again, I'm speaking off what I experienced back in the day. I don't know how much things have changed these days.
What would you say it is with apps? Do most apps use BMR or TDE?
Depends on the app. And again, I'm probably not the best example to ask for this because all of the apps I use, I'm trying to use the best ones possible. Like I'm trying to get TDE every
Right.
single time. But yeah, I'm trying to think of like I think MyFitnessPal from memory. I remember I'm pretty sure they do TDEE. I just didn't like their calculation because it was way off. Again, this I haven't used MyFitnessPal to track my TDEE in quite some time. But I do remember when I did it, it was like way off because their TDEE. So this is actually another thing for the calculation of your BMR. Are you getting the BMR measured based on I think it's the Harris-Benedict formula where they don't take into account your body fat. They just estimate, oh, if you're 80 kilos, oh, we'll just do an average body fat. Well, average body fat for me throws my reading massively off because if I'm walking around at 85 kilos and you're assuming I'm 20%, well, then that's not a true representation of my actual TDEE because, I want to get accurate. What am I actually? Just to give you an example, this isn't going to be 100% accurate, but it'll be roughly accurate. I know that my BMR right now would be 2000, 2100, roughly. But that's based on the Katch-McArdle formula, which takes into account my body fat. I enter my body fat in that, so it's more accurate. Whereas if I did the Harris-Benedict formula, um, it's giving me an estimate of what my body fat would be. So it would probably say that my BMR is more like 1600, 1700. And then when you do the activity multipliers off that, the TDE is way off. One thing that I think would really help the calculations on apps is taking into account the body fat. And then ideally, you'd have something that would be able to measure your body fat as well. A lot of people don't know how to estimate their body fat. I'd argue that even estimating is way more accurate in terms of your TDEE as opposed to having no idea whatsoever and just letting Harris-Benedict put whatever body fat it thinks that you are.
Interesting. Well, that opens up a whole other can of worms in that even if the app is using TDE, they might not be using the optimal, most accurate method of calculating the BMR portion of that TDE. Interesting. And what's my train of thought? I was gonna make a good point. And that's actually a good place to, and that's actually a good segue to bringing up our app, FitCommit. So with our app, we measure body fat and we give you the TDE number, and the body fat percentage feeds into that TDE number. So you get the most accurate TDE possible.
Yeah, I'm actually just because I was curious about how it's been so long since I've done it without a body fat measurement. So I'm actually just looking right now. So I'm looking at the Katch-McArdle method and then with the Harris-Benedict method. So it's about 350 calories difference. And like 350 calories, not only are you going to be, for example, if it was me, if I was in a deficit and I was 350 calories lower than what I needed to be, well, first off, I'm like, well, I could have been eating more food comfortably. So, you didn't have to suffer that much throughout your diet. Secondly, it can throw off the results you're getting. So like you could probably be thinking, oh, I'm in a 500 calorie deficit, when in reality you're like in a 150 calorie deficit. And it's like, oh, well, okay, no wonder I'm not getting the results that I thought I should be getting as well. So yeah, with the app that we got, it's making things as accurate as possible. So you put in your formula, your TDEE. There's two aspects of what we're trying to do with the app. So it's not just the body fat estimation, like prediction. It's not just that. It's also we're trying to take into account, like I was saying earlier, we want to be looking at your non-exercise activity and your exercise activity. Because if we just lump them in together and say, oh, it's a 1.5 times multiplier, better than nothing, but can we make it even better? Yeah, we can. We can separate, okay, you're an office worker, but you train twice a day. Or you're a laborer, but you train 3 times a week. And it just gets everything so much more accurate. And yeah, you're much more likely to get the results that you're after. And you're much more likely to not do anything negative, like something like metabolic adaptation. You're more likely to avoid that because you're not doing, the wrong thing. You're not massively getting the calories, way off where they should be.
Fantastic. So I think that's a good place to wrap it up. And I hope that this is very useful to our audience. Probably is. I mean, so many gyms are still stuck on BMR. So many apps are still stuck on BMR. And as a result, clients don't get the results they're looking for. Trainers don't get their clients the results they're looking for, et cetera, et cetera. And so we hope that helps both trainers and clients. And Probably if you're going to a gym or an app that uses BMR as the measure of how many calories you should be burning, uh, that would probably lead you to question everything else that they're advising as well, right? Like if they're not measuring the fundamental, most basic thing properly, then who knows what else they're not measuring properly. So definitely make sure that whatever app you're using or gym you're using has TDEE, and if they don't, ask some questions. And even if they are using TDEE, make sure they're using the right equation, the most up-to-date equation that takes into account your body fat percentage as well. Because again, what gets measured gets managed, and what doesn't get measured correctly doesn't get managed properly. So that's sort of the takeaway here. Andrew, any final comments?
I think we've covered pretty much everything. But yeah, the basic summary is the further away you are from what your actual TDEE is you're a lot less likely to be getting the results that you want. And there's the chance that you're actually doing yourself some form of damage, or you might be headed in the wrong direction. Like we said with the example of cutting or bulking, like you might think you're actually on the calories where you need to be, but you're probably going to be way off. Or even worse, you could probably be headed towards metabolic adaptation and just doing yourself a bunch of damage. It's going to require a lot of fixing a lot later on.
Yeah, it's a much bigger deal than you would think. Getting that number right, it's a big deal because it can not only not get you the results you're looking for, but it can potentially take you some steps backward and put you in worse shape than where you started off. So all right, folks, to summarize, don't go off of BMR. BMR is important. You need to know it as it is actually a part of the TDE equation, but it's not the number that you want to use to benchmark how many calories you need to burn. And so hopefully this message gets out and all the gyms, all the apps, all the trainers out there start using the correct metric, and that'll just lead to better outcomes for everyone. So, but with that, thanks for tuning in, everyone. Thanks, Andrew, for your insights. Once again, I'm Marcus. This is Andrew. We're the co-founders of FitCommit, and we'll see you next time. Take care.